Hey everyone, and welcome to Demi versus Megasexual. I'm Jessica of Remodeled Love.
And I'm Leanne from Philia blog.
And we just attempted two failed lives on Instagram and a failed TikTok live, which was
tragic.
So tragic, but people want this content. And so we're going to recreate it. Just me and you. You know what? The universe was like, y'all want to have an orgy, but the two of you need to figure out who you are.
Yeah, I think my hotel Wi-Fi just couldn't handle the fact that there were like 180 people like tuning in to you and I think like it just, I should have foreseen this, honestly, when I planned like these 15 lives. I should have foreseen that my hotel Wi-Fi might not be able to handle it. And which is very, very sad. But I think for this live and this thing and like upcoming lives, what I'll have to do is just record it on Zoom and release it later, which is fine because, people can just like play it back and we can do editing and stuff as well, so it'll be all good.
And you might get better content that way, being just the two of you and being able to focus and not have everyone being like, what's polyamory in the comments.
Yeah, I completely agree. It is what it is, so to begin, I guess, Jess, do you want to take the wheel and tell our folks about how and why we decided to have this conversation, and kind of also what demisexuality is?
Yeah, so I always want to take the wheel. So the way that this idea for this chat came about is because, let me take you all on a little journey again. So my whole life, I've been a very sexual person, but that sexuality has been very much like inside of me. Not something that I've always been able to fully express outward. Though when I was younger, I was definitely a lot, I would say, I would use the word freer than I am now. Come to think of it, I definitely have gotten more demisexual with age. I'm getting there. So I was always aware that I was more sexual than my friends. I was definitely the friend at slumber parties, getting all, the other girls to have a makeout party and whatnot. I want to start with my identity always. I'm a 36-year-old queer, cis, gendered, polyamorous woman in a legal cis het marriage, which I feel like is a huge privilege. And I always want people to know that the wisdom that I translate comes from a very privileged place. We've been polyamorous for 8 years, married for 12. And my dating journey has been a very confusing journey because my greatest dream in my life is to be a tantric sex goddess. I'm a Sagittarius. My Venus is in Scorpio though, and I want to be this fully embodied sexual woman. I struggle with sex, to be honest with you. I struggle to let partners give me orgasms. I would love to be somebody who can like female ejaculate. I want to be this totally embodied sex goddess. But it's really hard for me. I experience a lot of resistance. Inside of me is this very slutty, very sexual person, but on the outside, I'm this demisexual, and I didn't know I was a demisexual until last year. So in episode 7, season 1 of our podcast, I was interviewing my Meta, one of Joe's long distance partners, and they were describing their demisexuality. Now, traditionally, the culture describes a demisexual as someone who cannot experience sexual attraction without first having an emotional attraction. And usually that emotional attraction takes time to build. You'll hear a lot of demisexuals joking about how they just fall in love with their friends and wish they could just have sex with their friends because there's so much emotional connection there. But my Meta defined their deminess as there is a switch inside of them of sexual attraction. And sometimes that switch is on and sometimes that switch is off, and they are not in control of the switch. And that is their demisexuality. And that it can be very frustrating because sometimes they're in bed with somebody kissing and there is an emotional connection there, and they are desperately wanting that attraction, that switch to turn on, and it's just not turning on. They're not in control of the switch. And I was like, that sounds like me. If you listen to the episode, you literally hear the idea plant in my mind. I'm like, wow, that's me. And I've always really admired my megasexual friends. Of course, I didn't know that word at the time. And so about a month later, I realized I'm a demisexual, but it really took me a minute to realize it. One, because the culture doesn't teach us this. When we're sitting in sex ed classes in shitty American high schools, they're not talking about demisexuality, asexuality, aro stuff. Like, they're just not talking about any of that. So that's one reason I didn't know who I was, but also because when you hear, you know, demisexuality is on the A spectrum, I'm thinking, well, that can't be me because I'm the biggest slut. Because when my switch is on, I am so sexual. I have always been more sexual than my partners, had the higher libido. I have a lot of rejection sensitivity because most of my partners have been like, well, you're too sexual. You're too sexual. And so I have a lot of like, I'm too sexual, internalized shame, feeling like having to read my partner and be like, because I don't want to get rejected. So always having to like feel into the energy of like, is it appropriate to initiate sex right now? That's a whole other thing. And so on the inside, I feel like the slut. And because of that, I was like, oh, I can't be demisexual. And so what I did was created this identity, demisexual slut. Started the hashtag. If you're on Instagram and Twitter, go start looking up the hashtag demisexual slut. If you identify as one, start using it, please, because we got to get this narrative out here. And what I love about—
Honestly, so iconic.
Thank you. Well, and what I love about the demisexual slut identity is that it breaks down the binary of like, well, if you're demisexual, you're this and you're not that, and what sexuality is in general. And it's playing with this paradox, which my whole life is a paradox, right? Like, I'm an Enneagram 8, which is the challenger. I love to dismantle systems, but I'm also a people pleaser and I want everyone to like me. So I feel like this demisexual slut plays into this whole enigma that is Jess. And so I started to pursue this identity as a demisexual slut, and it's made the dating experience, especially the online modern dating app, as a queer polyamorous woman dating experience, has honestly been a shit show for me. I tend to manifest the same experience over and over again. And because Remodeled Love, my page is like a diary of mine, I'm constantly making content over what I'm learning, the patterns that are repeating, and what I'm trying to break out of. And so, you know, I have been trying to find this way to break out of the comfort zone of my demisexuality and embrace that slut. But what's not working for me is I still have to be a demisexual, and I have to embrace that in that way. And I've been trying to understand non-demisexual mentality. So I went to the content creator chat that we have together, and that I said, who in here is the opposite of me? And you were like, that would be me. I'm a megasexual. Now you take it away of what that is.
Thank you. So yeah, that leads in very nicely. Just to be clear, like, megasexual is not like a sexual orientation kind of label in the same way that being demisexual, asexual, bisexual is. I would say it's kind of more of a general kind of descriptor for like how I relate to people, in the same way that like terms like holosexual or sapiosexual or lumbosexual is, like, you know, it's not like a formal kind of sexual orientation. And the meaning of megasexuality is like literally the opposite of demisexuality. So where demisexual is, you can't develop sexual attraction unless you have an existing emotional / romantic connection. For megasexuals, is the opposite. You cannot develop a romantic and emotional attraction unless you already have an existing sexual connection. And so, like, you know, you and I are literally on like opposite ends of the spectrum. And so, yeah, like, you know, this group chat that we have, there's like 30 of us in it. Like, you know, when we share a fair bit about our dating lives, and, you know, sometimes it's like collaboration, sometimes it's just like us like memeing like in the chat, and it's great. You know, like my dating life and Jess's dating life is just, you know, it was complete polar opposites, like to the point where like sometimes, you know, I see stuff that like you put in the chat, Jess, and then I'm like, wow, I literally could not relate less. And it's just, yeah, and it's honestly so bizarre. So yeah, you know, like I like, you pitch the idea of us like having a conversation about kind of, you know, like how we navigate the dating world and to see if there's anything that we can learn from each other, basically. you know, you want to step out of your comfort zone. Like, I feel like I have things to kind of learn from you as well, in terms of kind of like taking things slow and like kind of sussing a vibe out more, you know, like, and, you know, coupled with the fact that I'm currently in quarantine for another 2 weeks after quarantine for 3 weeks total, and I'm really socially isolated right now. Like, this is the first of a series of lives that I'm doing with kind of other non-monogamous content creators, just talking about like polyamory and anything kind of related to that, loosely or not. And so yeah, like, super psyched to be kicking this off with what I'm sure is going to be a very interesting conversation. So Jess, I know that you have like a ton of questions prepared for me, and I'm just gonna kind of sit here and take it and like see kind of what what minds we can implode today.
Okay, so the first time my mind imploded was you, because I was like, okay, who here's the opposite of me? You were like, that would be me, and then you described your dating life and your process around dating, and that's when my little demi mind like imploded. But my slut was like, okay, shout out to all the demisexuals who love their demisexuality. I hate mine. My demisexuality feels like a cage that is keeping my slut imprisoned, and I don't like it. So when you talk about your life, like, I just want to be a megasexual. I am not interested in being a demisexual. Now, I have a chat coming up with somebody that I think is going to be really interesting, and it's about how they use their demisexuality to prevent bad connections from coming in. And because I guess they previously were highly susceptible to narcissists, which, hi me, they're like, oh, I use my demisexuality to keep narcissists out. And I was like, okay, but I'm a demisexual and I keep attracting narcissists. So like, I need to have that conversation with them. And I think that's because my inner slut is at war with my demisexuality. So my demisexuality wants a connection before I can sleep with someone, but my slut is ready to sleep with them right away. So my inner slut crafts this connection, right? And she just like drafts it up and hands it to my demisexuality, and it's a total lie. And once my ego is like, oh, there's a connection here, look at this beautiful connection, it's usually very spiritual for me too. I'm like, oh, I healed a wound and the universe allowed me to attract this new partner, and it's all this really intense connection. It keeps me from seeing red flags and things like that. And so I'm moving faster than my demisexual can suss out bad connections with. So I'm not a good example of either a slut or a demisexual, to be honest with you. I'm like, I think that's why I'm failing so hard. And also we're both neurodivergent, and the way that you approach dating, I think, is very neurodivergent friendly, which I also love. So when you're talking about dating and you were like, well, I need to sleep with someone on our first date, assuming there's an attraction there, which you said you can feel within the first 3 minutes of seeing someone. I want to talk about that. Because you're like, well, I need to know if this is worth pursuing. I need to know if we have sexual chemistry so that I know it's worth to even build emotional connection. And I was like, wait a minute, but how do you have sexual chemistry with somebody that you just met? Please explain.
Okay, so I'm gonna kind of preface this and say that, like, it's not like I see someone and immediately I'm like, yes, I would have sex with you on site. Like, first, like, I still feel that there is kind of some level of like, you know, I want to like suss you out as a person. And I think there's also like a small part of me that's like, you know, what if you're really hot but you turn out to be an asshole, and then I later find out and I'm like, you don't deserve to be in me or something. Like, and so there's like a small part, like, you know, it's like, you know, do you deserve to have sex with me, right? So I need to kind of figure out like what kind of person you are. But also obviously there's a safety element, and I think, you know, I don't know how much of that is like related to me being a woman and having to kind of navigate the world as a woman and like be more kind of conscious of like my personal safety in a way that I feel like being a man you wouldn't have to. But so yeah, like, it's not like, you know, I see someone and I'm like, I'm gonna hook up with you on site. Like, I've done kind of like one night stands, and that was actually not for me at all. So that's kind of that's like the first thing that I would kind of like preface that with. But, you know, like, you know, when I go on a date with someone, like, you know, usually upon like kind of seeing them, like, I'll be able to figure out, okay, like, you know, could I see myself potentially like having sex with this person? Like, you know, do I find them like physically attractive, right? Are they my type? And, you know, usually like upon seeing them, it'll be like yes or no. And if it's a yes, then like all I need is like further like conversation to verify that like this person is like safe and like, you know, like, you know, funny and like gets along with me and, you know, vibes. And then like after that, I'm like, cool, yeah, let's do it. It's a no. Most of the time it's going to stay a no, but then there have been some situations where like someone's personality has like won me over so much like over the course of like the hour or two that we talk that I'm like, actually you're great, let's bang. So that kind of my yeah, that's kind of my process. Like I see someone and I generally like I'm able to tell if I'm gonna like want to have sex with them, but then and then kind of after that it's just about like verifying that like, you know, they are a safe person to have sex with.
So there's an energy, you're feeling into an energy.
Yeah, you know, like it's gonna be like, I mean obviously there's gonna be like the superficial like, you know, like how they're, you know, how attractive they are, right? And then in terms of like the verification process like on the date, it's going to be like, yeah, energy, you know, vibes, like like do we have a rapport, like do they have like, you know, do they talk passionately about their interests,
Yes,
and
please.
yeah, and you know, how much stuff do we have in common? Do they have interesting things that like, you know, that like I can learn about, you know? Like actually we don't even have to have a huge amount in common, like as long as someone can talk about their interests in a passionate way, and I feel that like, you know, there's like stuff that like I am, you know, I'm gaining like novelty like in the connection, then I'll be like, yeah, no, this is great, like we're vibing, you know. So, you know, like, and yeah, and that's basically it for me. And so it's really important to me to have sex on the first date with someone, because like my absolute worst nightmare is like going on multiple dates with someone, like really vibing, having good chemistry, having good rapport, and then we get to the bedroom and there's just like no spark at all. Like that would be my worst nightmare, because I'd be like, wow, we built up so much expectation and now I've like wasted my time. Because that is kind of what it feels to me. Like, you know, if I'm going to be investing in like a long-term relationship with someone, like sex is fairly high on my priority list. And I have no shame in admitting that, you know. In fact, like, you know, my journey into non-monogamy, like one of the big reasons was sex. And while obviously polyamory and non-monogamy is not all about the sex, it is a very, very big part of it for me. And like I frequently talk about like how there's like a lot of weird like slut shaming in the polyamorous community, where people are like, oh, it's not about the sex, and therefore kind of shame anyone who's even kind of remotely like sexual, who like enjoys orgies or threesomes, or like, you know, is, you know, really kinky or whatever. And so I push back against that. You know, I'm like, I embrace my sluttiness, and I, you know, there's nothing wrong with being like really slutty and polyamorous. You know, you know, sex is a very, very big part of how I love people. And like, while I can have sex without love, to be honest, I would really struggle to love someone without sex. So that's kind of my rationale. You know, like when it comes to dating, like sex is so important for me that like I need to find out from date one, like whether we're sexually compatible, because if I don't know whether we're sexually compatible, I'm not going to feel comfortable investing emotionally or romantically. Like you know, it's going to feel risky to me. It's going to feel wrong to me. And so, you know, I want to have sex with someone on the first date. And then after that, I'll be like, okay, like we've got that down. And then now we can kind of start building the other stuff.
Okay, my Demi brain is imploding. We have so much in common. I wish I was taking notes because there's so many directions I want to go in right now. Okay, so first of all, to clarify, you are a megasexual, but you're not into hookups, and you're not into hookup culture, one night stand culture. I think that's a huge, not that all megasexuals are like you. I'm just noting that you're like, I'm not into the one night stand thing. You are trying to build consistent relationships.
Yeah, like absolutely. Like I in like my memory, there has only been like 2 times where like I've gone out like on, you know, and met up with someone with the specific intention of never seeing them again. Like I've only done that twice. And I didn't enjoy it both times. You know, like the first time was the first time I ever used Tinder, and I just generally didn't know how dating worked. I just went on the app, I swiped on someone, and then the first person I matched, I was just like, hey, I'm here, do you want to come over and have sex? And he was like, yeah. And then we did, and I was just like, this is not a vibe. Like, you know, it wasn't like I didn't want to or anything, but like looking back at it, I was just like, that could have, you know, like I would have liked to like gotten to know him like a little bit better. And also just like the other, and he was drunk, and it was just like, oh god, yeah, like I don't want to talk about that hookup, to be honest.
Okay.
And
so, question. So some things we have in common are I'm also looking for connection. I also want to see, can you talk passionately about things? Like, are you interesting? Can we have conversation? Can you make me laugh? So I'm looking for those things as well. And I think that's why in the past, I have been able to move at a speed. Most demisexuals are like, whoa, like that takes me weeks to build. And I'm like, but for me, it comes back to the switch. The switch is either on or it's off. And if the switch comes on the first date, I'm totally down to bone. But a lot of that is probably kind of U-Haul-y energy. So for you, you're just in megasexual groundedness. For me, if I'm having sex early on, my switch is on, I'm probably in a little bit of U-Haul story where like it's moving really fast. I have now put too much meaning on the connection, too much. It's like intense. I say U-Haul meaning like I've just recently learned that that whole trope around lesbian U-Haul is actually it can be a really toxic thing. And I think I do that a lot. That's that war between my inner slut and my demisexual is creating a lot of story around a connection so that I can get to it right away. Whereas I would like to get to the point where I'm like, is my switch on or is it off? Oh, it's on. Okay. And okay, let's engage in sex and not create a lot of meaning or story around it and see if I can just fucking chill and enjoy the closest thing I'll ever get to casual relationship.
Yeah.
So that's some things that we have in common. Where we're different is you are like, well, I need sex is the most important thing in a relationship with me, and I wouldn't want to have one without it. And I would have identified as that when I was younger. I would have been like, because I'm so sexual on the inside, only to be now 36 in a marriage that is very healthy. But my switch is not on in this marriage. So we have a non-sexual, asexual marriage. And for me, I'm fine because I'm polyamorous. I can go out and get it elsewhere. Now, for me, would I have designed a world in which like I'm having the best sex in my, nesting anchor partnership? Yes, but historically for me, I tend to have the best sexual chemistry with people that I actually probably could never nest with or have kids with.
Interesting.
Or be an anchor partner. Yeah. And so for me, I see my, anchor partner, my husband, as like, we are so aligned in every other category of the relationship that I think it's an outlier. I think it's unheard of, the amount of chemistry we have emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, politically, artistically. Like we're 100% aligned on all those things. And I'm like, I'm never going to find that. That's who I want to be married to. It's almost just like I've surrendered to what is here. And so I've learned that, sex isn't as important to me as I thought it was. That said, I would really like to find like a consistent sexual relationship where I'm having lots of sex. I also wonder if my demisexuality is keeping me from being probably a sex addict. Because when my switch is on with someone, I don't feel in control. That becomes very like, that's what I want to do. I lose balance in other areas of my life. And so I use it like an addiction that I want to feed because I feel so sexual and I love the connection so much. So I do think that there's a role that my demisexuality is playing in kind of keeping me more balanced. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I wonder if there's an element of like neurodivergent kind of hyperfocus in that as well as an element of like, you know, because it's so difficult to come by like, you know, such a kind of sexual connection for you that like when you do have one, you latch onto it because there's this element of scarcity.
Yes. That was huge for me a couple weeks ago in DMs where you were like, oh, well, there's probably a part of you in scarcity mindset when you're afraid to see a red flag and lose a connection because you've spent time investing in it. And I was like, wow, like I'm not aware that I'm in scarcity mindset, but you were dead on. I mean, that was something that really affected me that you said. And I've been chewing on since then of like, when I am trying not to see a red flag or I'm kind of, you know, like sunk cost fallacy.
Yes.
It's kind of like that. And so as a demisexual, I have some cost sunk into a connection, time, and, you know, previously, and this was one place where you're like, I don't understand. I have spent weeks chatting with people before I would meet up with them because I'm trying to establish a chemistry. Can this person talk about interesting things? Because my hell is going on a first date with someone who cannot carry a conversation. So I'm trying to make sure, like when I walk into a first date, I want to be really excited to see them. And the only way I've been able to do that in the past is to spend all this time creating this chemistry. And you were like, oh my God, no, I just want to meet.
Yeah, and also like honestly, you know, I've had situations where like I really vibed with someone over text and then like in person they were completely different. So I think it's because of those experiences that like, you know, because when you're behind a screen and you can draft your responses and things like that, and you know, you can be like really you can be a different version of yourself really. But then, you know, so, like I've encountered this so many times now where like we vibe so well over text and then we meet up in person and they are so shy and socially anxious and the vibe is dead, completely dead. And I'm like, are you even the same person that I've been talking to for the past couple days? Which is so wild to me. So then I don't kind of set myself up for disappointment anymore because at the end of the day, right, if I'm going to be building a connection with someone, it's going to be in person. So then I don't want the foundation of that relationship to be built over text because I don't want that to be like the base of like how we connect with each other and relate with each other. And so, you know, like, I guess maybe it's because like, you know, I see where you're coming from, Jess, in terms of like, you know, it's the worst to go on a date with someone who doesn't know how to carry a conversation. Like I 100% feel that. But also, you know, I'm fairly confident in my own ability to like carry the conversation for them if they're like, you know, really unresponsive. You know, I I shamelessly, you know, love the sound of my own voice. So then if they won't talk, I will. And I'll tell them stories and they'll laugh and I'll feel good about myself. So like it's not a disaster for me if I go on a date with someone who is just like not saying much because like we'll go for a drink, I'll try and tease some information out of them, and then at the end of it I'll be like, look, you know, like I just don't think this is going anywhere, like I'm not really feeling a spark, you know, let's just call it a night. So you know, I think like that's why I don't need to like have like a ton of like conversation with someone before going on a date, because when I go on a date I go into it with no expectations. I'm not necessarily like, obviously I'm excited for the date, you know, I'm excited to see like what the person is like, but I'm not like expecting I'm not expecting much from it, like in the same way that I think you are. Like that's kind of like the road test. So like I go on a date and I'm like, okay, well, we'll see how things go, and like worst case scenario I get to try out my best jokes and like see if they work and tell my stories a slightly different way and see if that works a different way. And so it's no loss to me. I also understand that like because you're a mom and I'm obviously like I'm, you know, I'm 23, I'm not married, I don't have kids. Like I have like way more free time than you do. Yeah. So like I know that like you don't have like this like the same amount of time to kind of just like spend like going out on dates with people who you might not even vibe with because you've got kids to look after. So like I think that's also another factor. Like I can go on like 6 dates in a week and it's fine. But obviously you can't do the same thing.
No. And okay, so a couple things. This is one area that I do think I can push myself out of my comfort zone, and I'm starting to. So I'm back on I'm gonna get on apps, which is always like a phase for me.
Same.
Apps, totally. And made some connections, and this is the first time I'm meeting up within a few days, and I'm not really engaging in that much conversation. And it's Like, it's like I just kind of made the switch. Like, I don't even feel the desire to. I'm just like, I'll see you at coffee. I really, and honestly, I do have that skill to carry conversations. It comes from a history in live radio where I had to interview people who may have been an expert in what they did, but they couldn't necessarily translate it to an interview. And so I actually can pull it out. But as you were talking, because I was like, no, I really do have that skill. Like, why am I so afraid of it? It's because I am not able to do what you said you do at the end of the date, which is, I'm not feeling a vibe here. It was nice to meet you. Let's call it a night. Like, when I'm in front of someone, I'm a people pleaser. And I am more worried about what they are thinking of me than what I am thinking of them. And because I need to be in my body to feel, am I attracted? Is there a connection here? Well, you can't, when I am in full people pleaser, I'm out of my body because I am empathetically trying to connect to them and feel, who do they want me to be, right? And so I'm not in my body, so I can't even feel what I'm feeling. And it's really gross. And I need to, this is something I'm really working on healing. And I think that I want to create connections ahead of time via text, because then in theory, I can just be excited about the date and can be, in theory, be excited to continue to grow the connection more. And I won't be looking at something that I have to then turn down, because it will have already established that we like each other. And this is just the first date that's going to be the first of many, where we're already feeling that vibe. Historically, I've been pretty dead on. Granted, a lot of those turned out to be not very sustainable relationships. So a lot of those might have been a narcissist mirroring me, and I didn't pick up on it, or maybe they were just destined to be short-lived. A lot of them were trauma bonds, because once I do make a connection, I make it way too quickly for a demisexual. I think that should be the first sign that there's a trauma bond there, is because I'm connecting way too quickly for a demisexual. But it was only recently that I had my first, we had great text chemistry. And then in front of them, I was like repulsed or like really turned off. And so that was kind of a wake up call, because I was like, oh, this is what everyone else is always talking about, of why they like meet up right away. So I'm really curious how it's going to go. I'm really excited to just like I think not having expectations is huge. I think as a demisexual in the dating world, I think I've talked to a lot of healthy demisexuals they come in with no expectations and they're more suspicious. I come in like a puppy. I think I lack maturity. I'm just like a hopeful romantic that really wants to fall in love and really wants to have great sex. And so I'm really looking for it there. And I'm not as open to, because I'm in scarcity mindset, I'm not as open to being like, this isn't it. And like, I really need to be willing to walk away. So I have a first date tomorrow. I had 2 first dates tomorrow, but as you know, one got canceled because he was just pushing the boundary too hard, trying to send me nudes and trying to sext, and we haven't even met. And I was like, okay, am I too demi for this person? And you chimed in and you were like, okay, I'm a megasexual and I don't even do that shit.
Yeah, like I honestly, like I find it so gross, like when people get really sexual with me immediately, or like over text, I'm like, no, like you've cute pictures, but like I haven't seen you in person, like I don't know anything about you, like I am not going to sext with you. It's like, no, like, so I think you needed a reality check in that moment when you posted that on your story. You were like, am I crazy, or am I just demi, or like, what is this? And I was just like, no, like I would not be down for this either. This guy is being super gross, like you do not need to tolerate that, like, and and even if like I didn't find it gross, like it's your boundary, right? And like he like repeatedly crossed it, so it was just like, oh my fucking god.
And like shout out to the people who are into that. Like I do have a lot of friends who are into exactly that. That is what turns them on, that they just get on these apps and it's like very kind of grinder culture or like gay male app, and it's valid. It is a valid sexuality, so I don't want to like shame it, but also it was interesting for fellow demisexuals to be like, wow, Jess, I really resonate with this, but also for other non-demis to be like, but that's not okay with me either. It's its own world and it requires consent. And anyway, so I'm excited to be present on the date, to be like, am I into this? Do I want to go further? You also have this theory that men in particular are seeing my demisexuality as a challenge.
Yeah. I mean, this is the whole thing, right? Like I think the entire like nice guy trope as well, like, you know, they're like, oh, if I just kind of like pay enough money for drinks and like say all the right things, then like I should be rewarded with sex. And I think like particularly if you know, if like you know, you saying that you're demisexual and then kind of putting that out front, it's like that's turning, I feel anyway, that some guys are gonna like conceptualize it as a game, where they're like, oh, you know, there's this like mystery thing that's like hiding behind this veil, and I need to like get through all the levels in order to like, you know, get to the treasure at the end of the treasure being like sex with you. And it's gross like obviously, and like yeah, and I think that it just kind of pushes them into that mentality when they're like, oh, you know, this is like this is not something that she just kind of does for anyone, so then like if I get it, then like that must say something about me and how special I am. At least that's kind of like, if I were to kind of put my like put myself into like some like asshole shoes, like I think that's how they would think.
Well, you're dead on. And Roy of Open Relating on Instagram said the same thing. Like before he even read my story where I said that you had this theory, he messaged the same thing, and he's like, it's based in toxic masculinity, that they see it as a challenge. So do you think I should take demisexual off and almost on my profile and almost hold it as this secret thing of where I just say I'm not interested in connecting and chatting like that and seeing if they listen to the boundary and not explaining it?
I mean, like, I think like most people generally like don't get super sexual over text from the start anyway. Like I don't, you know, like if people are trying to sext me like without having met me, like I block them. And so I don't necessarily feel that it's something that you need to put in like your profile.
Okay.
Though I would say that, sorry?
No, it's just interesting that I've been approaching it completely differently. Like I've been thinking of it as I'm giving someone information about how to try to date me, when in reality, it's probably giving the wrong people a playbook.
Yeah, I think unfortunately that might be the case. And obviously, like, I think it's something that you should disclose, but it's just not something that I would put in the profile, because of the way people are going to conceptualize it. You know, if you put demisexual, you're like, oh, I'm, you know, like I'm really slutty, like once, you know, like we start vibing and you get to know me, then people are going to be like, oh, I'm gonna, you know, try and like see like at what point like the switch happens, and they're going to try and like push that boundary. Like whereas you know, it's not like people are going to be, it's not like everyone starts like sexting from the start, right? Like I think I would hazard a guess that like most people, particularly most women, are probably not going to be like into like sexting from the beginning. So then you wouldn't be massively different from like most other people like on the app. So, you know, if you like, you know, start talking to someone and then they get really sexual with you right away, then like block, like that's not for you. If they, you know, actually try and engage you in conversation and stuff like that, you know, later on, then kind of bring in the fact that you're demisexual, and like by then, you know, you already know that like they're probably going to be like safe about it.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right. I'm totally experiencing this excitement right now to completely change up how I approach the dating world and be a scientist about it, you know, like reflect, try things, you know, not be attached to anything. But I'm almost feeling this call right now to play it closer to the vest, as they say. Mm-hmm. Just to know that because I think I communicate to people, but like, oh, I'm also the slut, because I don't want to be written off if I'm talking to a megasexual or someone or an allosexual of any kind, of like, oh, well, I don't want to date this, you know, demisexual because I'm looking for a great sexual connection. Because I'm like, oh, me too. But it just, you know, I talk a lot about my demisexuality feels like a cage, first of all. And then outside the cage is a wall. And there's a switch also inside of me. So there's a switch and a cage and a wall. And the way to get the switch on is to stimulate my mind. That's kind of the sapiosexual part of it. And the way to get the wall to melt is to not try to get the wall to melt, to be honest. And so, you know, I have a lot of dudes be like, you're complicated, which should just be an automatic fuck you, but.
Yeah, like I think the thing about kind of saying the demisexual and talking about this switch is that like people are going to keep trying to nudge that switch, like going to be like the focus. Like whereas if you're just like, hey, you know, I, you know, when like if you're getting to know me, like I really like, you know, conversations about like XYZ, and kind of give people like a lead on that, as in like, don't sex to me from the beginning, please. Then like the guys who read that are going to do that, rather than kind of focusing on, oh, when is she going to get sexual, you know?
Yeah. Okay. So completely changing directions here. So you are on a first date, you are vibing, you're like, yes, we're gonna fuck, yes, I'm gonna suss out, do we have sexual chemistry, so that I know whether or not it is worth pursuing this relationship further. Is the sex some level awkward because it's the first time and you don't really know the person?
No. Like it's not awkward at all.
I just don't, because like even for my non-demi friends, I feel like a lot of us have this like, oh, sex is always awkward the first couple times till you get to know each other's bodies, and there's just an, you know, you know, feeling. And so like it's always for me sex 4 or 5 where I'm like, okay, now we're vibing. And so now I'm trying to combine first sex with also we just met, and my brain short circuits. Like I don't get it. Like how is it not awkward? Explain it to me.
I mean, well, it's just like, okay, you know, I'm like, we've had a chat, like I've learned a little bit about your mind, and now that we're getting it on in the bedroom, I'm like learning a bit about your body, and those are like separate things. And so, you know, like obviously, you know, I'm like, I think it's probably because I've had a lot of casual sex. And so like at this point, like it doesn't take me that much time to figure out like what someone likes. Because like I think like if what I find is like for people who have been in like multiple kind of long-term relationships, or you know, just the one long-term relationship, they only know how to do sex one certain way because that's the way that their partner likes it. And then they do it on me and I'm like, whereas like for people who have a lot of casual sex and frequently like are like experiencing different bodies and like trying different techniques and like learning new things with different people, like they're much more adaptable and they're much more like versatile, and so it's really, I always find it to be so I'm going to amend my earlier statement and say like it is awkward if I am sleeping with someone who has just come out of like a really long relationship and like they are stubborn as hell and like are not listening to like what I'm trying to tell them about like what I want, and they're just kind of do everything that like their ex really enjoyed. But like if I'm sleeping with someone who also is like me and has had like a lot of sexual partners, or like at least has had enough to know that like different people like different things and you need to like engage and like, you know, listen to like what they're saying, like what noises they're making, how their body is responding, then like there is synergy, like, you know, like we're like, you know, listening to each other, listening to kind of what our bodies are saying, and then like it's great. So that's kind of what the difference is.
What is your success rate of, not that sex is about orgasms, let's get off the sex escalator, but you have mentioned before that you orgasm easily, frequently. Like what is your orgasm relationship with new partners?
I'm fairly easy to please, so like it's not difficult. So I would say that, you know, like the last couple kind of like sexual partners I've had, you know, like the first time we had sex, like I orgasm, and it's not difficult for me. And I think it's like, you know, if someone's like doing it wrong, then I will like sit them down and tell them like what I like until they do it right. and then I'll get it.
That's my deminess, is I can't let the pleasure in if I am not feeling special. And like honestly, I do feel like a really dope person. I think I'm cute. I think I'm smart. I think I'm funny. I think I'm talented. And I also have a praise kink. so there's some worship that I'm looking for. Like I want to know that that person knows who they have in bed with them. And I feel like I could just be anyone. If I feel that casual sexness, like I might as well be one of those pocket pussy things or whatever, which is totally fine. No judgment on people who like that. But for me, I need to feel like this person is really like into me. And I think that is the core of my deminess, is I don't like feeling like I could just be anyone, that it was a numbers game, that you went up to 5 other women before me at this bar and I'm just the one who happened to say yes. Like, it has to feel like, you know, that I'm special and you're going to treat me as such in the bedroom. And then I have so many issues around letting pleasure in, because either I feel like you do not know who I am and therefore I feel like I cannot open up my body, or I like you too much. And now I'm in performative mode and I can't let the pleasure in. That's a whole other fucking episode. So this is like really showing where I'm at on the ACE spectrum. Like, this is how I'm like, man, I'm definitely on that spectrum. Like, so someone you just met, their body doesn't like gross you out. Like,
you know, if they've like washed, and you know,
this is my
like, it's fine.
Is that like, I'm like, ew, genitals, unless I am like fucking in love with you, then I want like sit on my face and never get off. Right? That was
wow.
Like, yeah.
I mean, like, you know, I can like aesthetically appreciate like a good set of genitals, and there have been some where I've been like, that's a weird shape, but it's not gonna like ick me out like in, you know, in that way, you know. I'm still gonna be like, I'll try it, you know. Like,
and I think that's so cool. And like, I wish that I was wired that way. I really do. And a lot of my megasexual friends, all the same thing. They're just like, no, I just love cock, I love pussy. And I'm like, cool. You know, like, fluids too, like fluids, I am like, bleh, until if my switch is on, I want it all over me. And, you know, I've talked a little bit about this before, and other demi sluts have been like, oh my God, thank you for putting that into words. But that's how I'm like, maybe I could be mega. And then I'm like, nope. I can't do it.
Yeah, no, bodies don't gross me out, you know, like, as long as like they're like clean and it smells, or like, you know, it smells the way it should smell and all, then I'm like, yeah, let's go, you know. But yeah, you know, it's like what I said, it's about like kind of like learning someone's body. I think like the main thing for me is just like knowing, not so much like feeling special or anything like that, but knowing that like they are listening to me, you know, like they are like, and I don't mean like listening to me I don't just mean like listening like verbally to like what I'm saying and kind of like what I like and all that, but also like listening to my body, like the way I like respond, like the sounds I'm making, like whatever, like, you know, that's kind of like what gets me, you know, like when someone like is listening and adapting and kind of like we're molding to each other, like that's what it is for me.
Are you able to differentiate between sexual chemistry and someone who just isn't a good lover, but like could be? Or like, like, okay, because sometimes I've been like, wow, you have potential, but you just haven't been taught. You haven't had the right partner, right education. And other times I'm like, no, it is a chemistry issue.
Oh, that's such a good question. Because like I'm thinking about like, you know, I think there have been some people I've met who have had like the enthusiasm, but they don't have the skill. Like, yes. I do think that sex, like just like any other kind of ability and skill, like, you know, some people have like a natural talent for it, and some people like have to work really hard at it, and some people like no matter what they do, they're gonna be shit at it. And like that's the unfortunate truth. It's kind of like how, you know, some people are naturally really good singing, some people like, you know, have to take lessons, they, you know, work at it and then they get good at it, and some people are just tone deaf.
Yes.
So
technology, yeah. So you think some people can just never be good at sex?
I have met people, or maybe it was just like you just vibe badly, but like I have, you know, I have had sex with like friends who, you know, I really care for and like, you know, vibe with, and I've been like patient with them because I'm like, I really want this sexual connection to work, dude. And you know, we done like, we do it like 3 or 4 times, and I'm like, you know, actually like holding their fucking hand to like tell them what to do, and it's just not happening. Like I cannot express to you the amount of like patience and frustration like that process was, and at the end of it I was just like, look, I don't know. I just don't know what it is.
No,
so I don't know. Like I think that there have been situations where someone has been good in bed, but we haven't had sexual chemistry. And there have been times where like we have had sexual chemistry, but then like that hasn't translated in skill. So yeah, I do think that they are separate things.
Okay, so I have the perfect way to end this, is my brain just like boiled down. So you are experiencing passion during these first sexual encounters, yeah? Would you call it passion? Okay. So yeah, for me, the passion has to be there. And I'm sure you're like, whatever to astrology, but for anyone listening to this who's going to know what I'm talking about. So I'm a Sagittarius sun, fire. I've got Cancer moon, Cancer rising. That is water signs. It's fucking emotion. I am double Cancer. That is why I'm fucking crazy. And then Venus and Scorpio, that's the plunge to the depths of myself, right? So I am a fucking passionate lover. I love the passion. And when the passion isn't there, I am like, this is so weird. But for me, if I felt passion with someone that I just met, it would feel insincere to me. I would be like, you're making this up. Like, how are you feeling passion for me? You don't even know me. And it's feeling special. It is feeling special that makes me feel the passion. I definitely think it is how I'm wired, but I'm excited to get out here with your tutelage and your feedback and play around with some different types of connections and see what I can create for myself. You definitely called me out. You're like, why are you only dating dudes? Like, why am I never hearing you talk about women? And I was like, because so many reasons I don't want to get into in this episode, mainly that I'm demi-romantic with women, but hyper romantic with men. And so it's easier for me to want to go out and date on dating apps. But anyway, I have a first date with a woman, all thanks to you. This whole connection is all dedicated to you because yesterday you called me out and I was like, I should download a lesbian dating app. And I did because of you. And then I found this goddess. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah. And she's so fun to talk to. I was like, this is stupid. Why am I even talking to men?
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's just funny because like you were like kind of late in life bisexual or like whatever, and so I was like, I'm seeing you kind of embracing your sexuality and stuff, but like, where are the women? Where are the non-binary people? I'm just seeing a bunch of dudes in your stories. Like, what is going on? Like,
it's the fucking grooming and the hyper romantic versus demi-romantic, and I don't know. It's like I can push myself out of my comfort zone, but at the end of the day, I'm still wired how I'm wired. And I call myself like a late blooming bisexual because I've known I was bi forever and identified as bi forever, but was not comfortable pursuing it. And I think it's because of the demisexuality. I didn't know I was demisexual. I would have women hitting on me. I would go to like queer student union events at my college, and like I just would be super uncomfortable having a demi script. But anyway, this conversation has been amazing. I'm so proud of us for pushing through like 3 failed technology shit shows.
Oh yeah, honestly, that was just I should have foreseen that like my hotel would not be able to handle it, but
I really
it is what it is. I'm glad we pushed through.
I am too. Thank you for sticking with me. Thank you for your sage advice. Thank you for who you are on the internet and who you are in this world. And one day I'm going to come to a sex party with you.
Yes, I would love that. And you don't even have to engage with anyone. Just like vibe with me and look at some sexy people. Like aesthetic attraction, right? Yeah, just aesthetically appreciate all the people kind of dancing in lingerie. It'll be really fun.
Okay, I can't wait. Okay, have a great day. I'm gonna go to bed.
All right. Okay. Bye.